Hello, everyone. We are just kicking off at 3:30, and this is a webinar, not a normal Zoom meeting. So you're just going to be able to see me and Tatum, and please just use the chat for any questions. We're going to be doing a couple of little exercises and some feedback and stuff like that. So you've got that chat function there. And if there's anything you remember later on that you should have asked us, I'll put my email address in the chat and you can just give me a shout as well. But yeah, welcome everyone. Wonder, should we maybe just do, what time are we on? Yeah, it's past. Should we do a quick intro, Tatum? Oh, you're on mute.
I think this is my first webinar, actually. So, yeah, let me know if I... Oh, I just saw the chat about how we have a strong houseplant back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had to move mine because otherwise it looks like something's growing up my head.
I guess I have one of those too. Yeah. So today we are talking about treating ourselves kindly. So one of the common terms for that is self-compassion. You can think of it in whatever way you want. A nice way to behave and talk to yourself. Most of you probably already know Neil, but Neil, can you quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Neil. I've been working for Shine for a couple of years now, and I'm also studying to be a counsellor because I found when I learned about self-compassion, it was so life-changing, and practicing that just really helped me when I was quite low. And I had a brain tumor coming up to 5 years ago now. So that's me. So over to you, Tatum.
So I'm a yoga teacher. I've been around Shine for now. I'm also a podcast host, if you've got that. And I have a really fierce inner critic, and self-compassion and has changed things immensely for me. So I know what it's like to spiral and have the critic take the wheel. And so what we're going to do today, we're going to start with is so tough. I mean, we don't come into the world, a lot of us, being hugely compassionate to ourselves. So we really want your input for that. We're going to, myself and Neil, kind of talk about our experiences, what's worked for us. I'm still the comedian. We've got a little video of him. He won't be in person, but he'll be sharing what works for him. And we've got some slides with tools, because here at Shine, we love a tool slide. And then we're going to end the session today with... I just saw my internet was unstable, so making sure I wasn't frozen there. We're going to end today with relaxing into self-compassion. So it will be a really lovely way to end up the session, absorb all the information that you've heard, and hopefully float out of here at the end. So yes. So Neil, do you have your whiteboard ready?
Yeah, so what we're going to do, everyone, first is I'm just going to share a whiteboard. And what we'd like you to do is just in the chat, think up some ways that you might be sort of unkind to yourself, or some barriers about with self-compassion. Yeah. I'm just going to write them all down so we have a nice big list. But
yeah, so I'll start with, so I think sometimes tough.
Sorry, Tatum, your internet's just cut out there a little bit.
Okay, so give me 1 second.
I can kick us off though. It can, mean, it can be, I think the concept can seem quite soft and fluffy for a lot of people, but I think it's a real barrier can be your sort of your upbringing and your life experience. So I'm going to put that in. I am dyslexic, so if I do spell anything wrong, please don't shout at me.
Yeah, so upbringing is a big one, isn't it? And also I think the culture, like, you know, at school as well, like we're not necessarily taught to be really kind to ourselves. We're often sort of motivated by fear of embarrassment or humiliation.
But yeah, get typing in the chat. Oh, good. Okay, we've got a few there. So comparing yourself, yeah.
Yeah, fear of failure. Yeah. And
self-doubt.
It's a thing of, if we're hard on ourselves, then almost like it's a protection thing. Like I think at school, like no one else can say something horrible to you if you're already saying something horrible about yourself. It's kind of like, if I'm hard on myself, then, you know, I'm protected from what anyone else says. Yeah, past relationships. That is the way other people have treated you. Yeah, I think that imagining fatigue is a really common, because yeah, fatigue is just like, oh, it's like, it's so intangible and yet all pervasive at the same time. It's like being in a cloud, you know you're in it, but you can't touch it and hold it and quantify it. Toxic perfectionism.
I really like this well, I don't like imposter syndrome, but I really relate to that one too as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is my pain real? Yep. Self-sabotage. And I love, yeah, what's normal? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's the thing, sometimes taking blame for things that are actually out of your control. And one of our favorite words is coming up, should.
Yeah,
yes.
We're going to be diving into should.
Yeah,
survivor guilt.
Shooting on ourselves, survivor's guilt, yes. Yeah, and that dealing with that inner critic is even worse when you're ill or fatigued. Yep. Yeah, attempting to excel. Yeah. And has anyone found that actually being hard on themselves has worked at some period in time? Were you ever like really mean to yourself and then you did jump into an action? Because I know that for me, it has worked a few times. Yes, okay, someone else is with me on that. Yeah, that thing of like, you know, maybe I should be more goal-oriented, pushing through. So being hard on ourselves, sometimes we feel it's motivating. Yeah. Yeah.
I think one that I'd put in as well is about, is it selfish? Is it selfish to be nice to yourself?
Yeah.
Impending doom, yeah.
Yeah, the juxtaposition of actually using maybe a harsher voice to get lots of things done, but at the same time, then it making you really tired. So there's that yin and yang to that. So
we've got time for another very quick one or two if anyone's got something that they can't see or can't.
I feel that my fear with being self-compassionate was that it would lead me to just never getting up off the couch and eating gallons of anything and drinking.
So everything. Kind of like unproductiveness then.
Yeah, I was really scared that if I was, you know, that if I was self-compassionate, that I would let myself get out of shape. Yeah. Wallowing. Yeah. Malingering. Oh, great words. Malingering. Yes.
Not doing those things, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've already got a lot there. And I think the purpose of this exercise is really, I mean, if you look at that and you see all of that in front of you, but your brain is telling you, well, self-compassion is just a fluffy technique. It's always easy and it's nice and everything. If you see how many barriers there are there, I think it really shows you how challenging it can be, and how we're going to talk about in a bit, but how, like a muscle, it's, you wouldn't run a marathon tomorrow if you're not an experienced runner. It's really about like training that up and getting used to that. And I still think I'm a novice at self-compassion. I compared myself when me and Tatum were chatting to sort of couch to 5K. But I think, like I said, the purpose of this is just to show you like an image, just so you can see how difficult it really is, especially when you've had cancer and you're vulnerable.
Yeah. And we just got another thing through how, yeah, sometimes we think of self-compassion as like, yeah, kind of maybe wallowing, malingering and taking a nice bath. And actually, yeah, is that going to sort out? And I think there's a lot of sort of misconceptions about what self-compassion is. There's some work done by Elizabeth Neff, and how she describes it, I think, is quite beautiful. On the one hand, self-compassion is validating, comforting, and soothing yourself. And on the other hand, it is also motivating, protecting, and providing. So the same way that, you know, if you were looking after a child, you wouldn't give a child a big bottle of gin, right? So if you're looking after that child, you would take care of its needs. What it actually needs is something to play with, something to look at, to go to the park. And this idea that actually when we're being self-compassionate, we do the same thing, with that we take ourselves out to the park, we play, but we also pay our bills. You know, that it is, self-compassion does run into way more than a nice bath. So yeah, thank you for mentioning that. So Neil.
I think one other really important bit when you're starting to practice self-compassion and getting this sort of through to your head is something that I struggled with, is being compassionately compassionate. I mean, there's nothing worse than saying I should be more self-compassionate, or I'm rubbish at being self-compassionate, because that's the opposite there. You're beating yourself up before you've even started. So I think it's really important to remember how negative that should word is, and not to think, well, I'm not doing it properly, I should be better at this. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Instead of just switching that around and think, right, I'm a beginner with this. I'm going to try once a day, once a week, once a month, whenever, to just get a little bit better, and to practice this a little bit more. And I think certainly from my experience, I had 28 years of being unkind to myself. I'd never heard of being kind to myself before. And so it was so ingrained that suddenly when you're showing this other way, it doesn't just change overnight. It's learning a whole new way a whole new way to speak to yourself. And I know certainly when I went for counselling, my counsellor said to me, imagine you go, well, he said to me, if you're having a bad day, what does it look like? And I'm like, well, because I had a brain tumor in my balance center, I walk a little bit funny and I get pains in my legs. And he says, what do you say to yourself then? And I'm like, oh, you're an idiot, just stop being stupid, you know, you're just useless and worthless. And then he kind of flipped it around to me and said, imagine you go into a bar and your friend has a disability with his hands, and you get a couple of beers and he goes to pick up his beer but drops it. And the bartender comes over and says, you idiot, you're just stupid, you're worthless, what would you do? And I sort of said, without thinking, well, I'd punch the bartender. And my therapist said, well, why are you speaking to yourself like that? And I didn't know what to say for about 10 minutes. It was so ingrained in me to think, well, that's just normal, isn't it? And really, it's not. And I think especially in this country, it's not really talked about in school. It's not really common for you to think of things in that way. But yeah, that was certainly how I got introduced, with a bit of a bang, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine being speechless for 10 minutes after that. Yeah, because if anyone else heard what that voice said, it is quite shocking just how mean it can be, and how that can then, sometimes spiral you into all kinds of other emotions and feelings of guilt or shame or worthlessness, which are really, really tough. So when you were doing that, when you were being really hard on yourself, like, what was the effect of that on you? Like, what was the effect of that on your general well-being, or how you move through the world?
I mean, I was already very vulnerable and tired, and all of the sort of common side effects that my diagnosis had brought up, but it made everything worse. My symptom when I get when I'm tired, or just it kind of happens randomly, is I get a bit dizzy. And so in my brain going, "You're an idiot, stop being stupid," it made it worse. So I would go in a vicious cycle, and then go home and feel miserable and think, well, nobody likes me, and I'm just going to sit in by myself because I'm a burden on people. And it was really spiraling. And it was such a benefit once I could learn that voice was really horrible. And yeah, it just sort of seeped into all of my life. And I really believe that when you become vulnerable from a cancer diagnosis, from anything really, there's crossovers with a lot of different things in life, but my experience with cancer, it brings up vulnerability from childhood, or from school years, or I mean, that was my experience as well. It sort of, as I mentioned at the start, I'm dyslexic, and it brought up feelings of not being good enough, and sort of merged that all together. So at a really vulnerable point in my life, it didn't serve to help me. It did the opposite. It really hindered everything I was doing. So
I think that's the thing. Well, two parts to that. One was when you were talking about not going out, like my heart just went out to you, and I was like, oh, and then I thought, oh yeah, I used to do the same thing. I used to have these attacks of, that I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't even do something that everyone else can do. Everyone else puts clothes on and they go out into the world, and I couldn't do that. And everything was wrong with me, and I've always been a failure. And it was like, it would spiral. And then I was like, I can't be around people. And so the thing that would have helped me, which is, maybe seeing my friends, or maybe seeing another version of me reflected back, I just ended up in this spiral and in this place with that voice, which is not fun. And I think that although sometimes before cancer, you either had more bandwidth to deal with that, so you were generally tougher or stronger or had more energy, and maybe it motivated you a lot. So you kind of put your head down, you let the voice kind of come in, you got a lot of stuff done. But then those coping mechanisms don't necessarily work when you've got zero energy. So what happened after you started being more compassionate? So then when you got dizzy, what was it
was really interesting, I think, because I didn't just change overnight. It was the realization that I think was the biggest thing. And then noticing in moments where I'm like, why am I telling myself this? And like I said, I still think I'm a novice with a lot of these things, but the way that worked for me was sort of journaling. And what I would do is I would write a journal, or write a bit in my journal, and I would say exactly what that voice is telling me. So I would say, I feel really dizzy today. I'm an idiot. I'm useless. I can't even go to the shops. What's the point in me being here, or something? But then I would look at that like one of my best mates saying that to me, and write down the answer, like, well, completely differently to how that voice was telling me. Like, it's okay. I mean, you're having a bad day, but you've had bad days before. You've got through bad days before. Everything will be okay. Why don't you go for a bath? Why don't you watch something on TV? Why don't you do something that makes you feel happy, instead of lying there miserable? why don't you do some painting? Because you can do that and that makes you feel good, and it's made you feel good before. So coming back at it with like a supportive thing. And all the time I would read what I'd written and think, I don't even recognize that. Like, I don't even, it's like a completely different communication, but read it back and think, oh, actually, yeah, why don't I do this? Instead of wallowing, like someone said earlier, why don't I do this instead? Why don't I support myself?
So it ended up being more motivating.
100%. And better for my anxiety, better for my depression, because it didn't, like I said, it didn't change overnight, but it started to chip away at that burden feeling, which is a really common part of depression. So it really started to say, well, you're not a burden. Like, people love you, people do care about you. The world is better with you in it. And why is that horrible voice telling you this? Like, really challenging that, and not ignoring it, hearing it come up. And like I said at the start, not being like, oh, I can't listen to that voice, I'm an idiot for listening to that voice.
Right.
Thinking, I've heard that voice, I've heard that opinion, but I am challenging that. And I don't think that's right. And I'm going to do what's best for me. Because I think we're all, within Shine, we're really good at supporting each other, but supporting ourselves is a whole new ball game when you've never done that before.
Yeah, and actually one of the things that like we often do in Shine and in the programs is like we talk about this term holding space. So if someone else is speaking, that we're there and we're holding space for them to have, you know, their feeling, their expression about what's going on. And if someone asks for advice, then we provide, you know, maybe we relate, maybe we, you know, if that's something that they would like. And I think that's actually quite a nice way to think about that with ourselves, because sometimes it is just acknowledging that actually what you're dealing with is overwhelming, is holding space for, you know, some of the examples from earlier, like, am I in pain? Am I making this up? Like, this is really hard. Fatigue is so hard. You know, there's no one way of managing fatigue. It's sort of using different techniques on different days, and how that juggling can be so challenging. And then on the flip side is also asking yourself, like, actually, I'd like some practical, you know, can you relate to me with this? Like, you know, and then it's kind of like, okay, like, what can I, you know, maybe we start with a cup of tea and a list. You know, so maybe we start that one document, maybe we get this one thing done. The compassion can come with those two sides. So one of the things, like, if you're interested, there is quite a lot of research into self-compassion, and some of the outcomes of changing how we behave to ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, is general improved feelings of happiness, life satisfaction, higher levels of motivation. So that being kind voice is actually more sustainable. Better relationships. I mean, this is like, it's starting to sound a bit like a magic miracle cure, doesn't it? But this has been borne out in some of these studies. So physically feeling better, less anxiety and depression, plus, and this is a massive one, is increased resilience. So the ability to deal with chronic pain, the ability to deal with, you know, really tough, overwhelming things, when we are kind to ourselves, when we are looking after ourselves and holding space for ourselves and kind of figuring out like how to do things in a way that makes life a bit easier, that is actually beneficial in like so many different ways. So I think that that resilience, again, being kind to yourself can nourish you instead of deplete you. So if you're lying on the sofa and you're like, oh my God, like, I can't believe you've been lying on here for like 2 hours, you haven't done anything done, like, you're a waste of space, you're a waste of oxygen. If that's just going on, you just want to like go underneath the covers and like, you know, not get up off the sofa. But if you've got like kind of a kind voice of like, however you speak to yourself, this is where it comes to the language, right? Because I think that how you communicate with your inner voice should be from person to person. So if you're quite a funny person, I think it should be quite a funny voice, you know. You could even reference yourself affectionately, like, okay, hon, you did have 2 hours on the sofa. What do you need in order to get up? And that's actually like, that's a really kind, like, I acknowledge you're really tired, but maybe we're moving on now. What do you need to do that? Is quite a nice way of doing it, and a sustainable way of doing it. Yeah,
for sure. I think it's quite interesting. I think we're going to look at Simon Amstell, the comedian. We're going to look at his a short video. It's only about 2 minutes long, but I'm going to share my screen.
Can I just mention before we do?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So the other part of the sort of happiness inducing, well, there's two things. The other part for happiness inducing is that when we are worried about that voice in our head jumping on us when we make a mistake, then we are less likely to we're less likely to go outside of our comfort zone. So we're less likely, I'm not talking about like risks, like, scaling the side of a mountain or something, but like risks might be going to an event that you don't know that many people at, or online or in person, or a risk might be going for a new job. A risk might, it could be really small, it could be really big. But when we are hard on ourselves, we tend to make our lives smaller, because dealing with the fear of failing is devastating. If that voice gets like, oh, well, see, like, you didn't get this, and then it's like we're giving something over. But when we start to harness that voice, then it holds space for like, oh, well, that didn't quite work out. One, how can I hold space for you emotionally right now, what you might be feeling? And on the other side, how can we maybe regroup, maybe try this again? So I think that's a really lovely thing to kind of keep in mind, that being self-compassionate can actually make life a bit bigger, a bit wider, a bit safer, which, makes it more interesting. And just before we get to Simon Amstell, the other thing I just wanted to mention is the correlation between a vicious inner voice and stress. So obviously, when you're going through cancer, it's so stressful, like your nervous system is activated, and that can make that voice bigger. Two parts to that is that instead of arguing with the voice, instead of going, you're wrong or anything else, if you hear yourself getting into that sort of negative self-talk that's mean and horrible, is then doing something that's going to calm you. So don't even worry about, you don't have to engage in conversation with it. You can just, give yourself a hug and go, okay, what am I going to do to calm my nervous system down? What makes me feel safe and calm and taken care of? Because when we do that, when we practice it, we're taking ourselves out of the fight or flight, freeze, submit, collaborate nervous system, and we're moving into the parasympathetic, which is the one where it reduces adrenaline in our system. And we can actually, even by doing that mentally, start to release oxytocin, which is the connection. So that's like the love hormone, and endorphins. So even it's not just about like this mental ball game in your mind, your body actually chemically changes when you're taking care of yourself. Like it's everything gets on board with taking care of yourself. So I just wanted to mention that before Simon Amstell.
Yeah, some great points there. Okay, right. let's get this shared. And I think this is a really great video. It really sums up a lot of what we've been talking about. But yeah, give me a thumbs up, Tatum, if you can hear it okay.
Okay.
Talk to myself in a very... I have a way of communicating with myself now that I didn't have before. I talk to myself in a very loving, kind way. I stroke my own arm sometimes and say, "You're doing really well." You were so funny.
That's so nice.
Yes, I do that because sometimes it's like tiring being on tour. I remember I did this like talk at a university, and then there was like a lunch with students, then there was a show, then the next day I had a matinee, and like that night I like stroked my own arm. Maybe this is the first time I did it, and I said, "You're so great at the lunch, at the talk, and you've done so well. You've got 1 or 2 more shows tomorrow, and then we've got 3 days off, all right?" And I was like, okay, I can do it. And it's like, I did that with myself. It's like nuts. Whereas before it would have been, I wouldn't have even had that communication. And sometimes this is the other thing I learned from the retreat, when you are triggered, it's not so important what is triggering you, the person who said the thing or whatever it is, what within you has been triggered. And so when something causes me any sadness now, I quite quickly have a little chat with myself about what it's reminding me of, what's really going on here. I don't think it's about that random person on the street. I think it's reminding me of when I was 13 and blah, 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 blah. So
yeah, what do you do with that when you identify like, okay, so I actually know that this is what's triggering me?
Yeah.
Then what?
So then it's like, oh great. Oh, so it's an opportunity for healing. Thank goodness this lunatic person has upset me, because I get to heal this bit of me that this bit of trauma that was never addressed. Trauma is a big word there, but you know, and so I go, and so I've had the memory. I've had the memory, and then I go, oh, how are you doing, 13-year-old Simon? Nobody's probably ever said this to you, but that must have been really hard when that happened. And then my kid self goes, oh, it was hard. I had no one to talk to. I was like, oh, do you want to talk to me now? All right then. And then we have a little change. It dissipates because it's been addressed.
God, it's almost like whenever people talk about, and God knows if ghosts or anything exist, but like a spirit that can't move on, whatever, to the other world because it's got like, you know, like something that it needed communicated, needed said. It kind of feels a bit like that, like we're haunted by the sort of like ghosts of our younger selves until we can just sort of release them by letting them say their piece or just feel seen.
Yeah, that's it. That's great. I have a way.
So yeah, I really like that, like arm stroking. I have to say I do it. I give myself lots of hugs. I'm a big self-hugger. Yeah. Because yeah, it's the things are hard and they're overwhelming and sometimes they're too much. And you know, those small things that we can do in terms of touch, in terms of, yeah, like as I said, you know, it can chemically calm us down. It can change the way our brain, everything processes information.
Yeah, and I'm just going to share with you guys just some slides that we've got, just with some sort of toolkits that I think are useful. So when we deliver this workshop on our programs or anything, there's some information here, but I think some of you can tell I've written it because there's lots of swearing, but I think like this one here, my mentor asked me, would you be friends with people who spoke to you the way you speak to yourself? And I was fucked up for 30 minutes. Like moments like that, and certainly like we've already talked about, our brains not being wired that way. Practicing, I think, as well. I love this cartoon because I can't believe you said that, you fucking moron. I can't believe you said that, you sexy moron. And changing that up as well, changing the habit there. And tool-wise, we've just got a couple examples here. So I already talked to you guys about the sort of journaling or writing down. And I think there's loads of examples. If you Google Dr. Christian Neff, I think I've put her in the chat earlier, but there's loads of information there, or just Google self-compassion.
Oh yeah, I called her Elizabeth earlier, but yeah.
Well, I typed Elizabeth in the chat, but it's Christian Neff. And but if you just Google self-compassion, you'll find her. And there's loads of different methods for different people. I mean, you might be more of a visual person. So for example, there's this vision board where you can write down some self-care activities, and you can have that up somewhere, maybe next to the fridge or something, or in your kitchen or in your bedroom. And when you're having a really tough day, you think, well, that's some ideas about maybe what I could do. Maybe I'm not going to get to the gym. Maybe I'm not going to go for a walk, but I could have a bath. I could eat some chocolate. And that might be on the board as things to take care of yourself. And that's a visual way.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good thing to come back to that, being compassionate about being compassionate, because it's, you know, sometimes like the journaling doesn't work for me. So I've had to find other ways of doing it. And like, yeah, it isn't a one size fits all with any of this. But yeah, and we are going to share these slides with you. Yeah, we just got a question about that. We will send these out. But it's like exploring them in a way that's like, oh, I'll see how this works. You know, I actually put up on my fridge, I couldn't afford a yoga retreat. And so I put on my fridge a retreat at home. And it was a month worth of small activities that were retreat-esque. So I would, and when I did one, I went to it and I marked it off. So it could be make myself a green smoothie, or it could be an evening of reading, or it could be a meditation that I've never tried before. But you can make that be whatever you're into. So if you find music really relaxing, it could be like finding your favorite band and, you know, listening to them for a period of time and just knowing that that's going to really calm you down. Like there's definitely not a one size fits all with that. So, and
I think going on that, Tatum, we had a conversation the other day about, and I mentioned it earlier on, but about growing that muscle and practicing it and treating it like a marathon, or like going to the gym, or like building a muscle up.
Yeah, and I got sent a message. It was from someone's Instagram page, and she was writing about being single, and you know, she had, I guess, been quite open about her previous relationship, and was talking about this kind of this epic, this huge like love story. And she said, you know, she was talking about a weekend that she had, and she laughed and sobbed, and she did rituals, and she, you know, had some fun sex with herself, and she did all these things. And she said, actually, that was epic, you know. And she was talking about loving herself wildly, like sweeping herself off her feet. And I was like, okay, well, that's a new level of heights to go to. So yeah, it can help with like the smaller things, but also like you can stretch the imagination into what would happen if I swept myself off my feet for an evening, if I entertained myself. Like, you know, what parts of your personality might be developed, might come out of that. So there's really no limits. Two questions though that I think are really lovely to think about is, what do I need, and how can I make things easier for myself?
Yeah, I love that one.
So we're going to revisit that in the relaxation, but we definitely would love to hear your questions.
Yeah, and like we said, just pop them in the chat. I'm just going to put my light on because it's suddenly got very dark.
You're disappearing, Neil, into the darkness. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Yeah, that's the thing, is again, being so kind on yourself. Like, it doesn't have to be anything big and dramatic. It can be lovely and gentle and soothing and calming and validating. And, you know, should you have the energy, should you be inspired to, you know, I used to do the Artist's Way, which is kind of like, it's from the 70s. It was this like guide to creativity, and they used to call it an artist's date, where you take yourself out for the day by yourself, and you had to go out by yourself. It couldn't be with anyone else. So you had to like figure out, like, what would I do on a date with myself? Like, what's interesting to me? And this was, you know, written in the time before phones. So, you know, actually spending time just even thinking about what would you do just for you. Yeah. So yeah, we'd love if you've got any other questions.
We're going to do some questions and answers before we go into the relaxation, just in case you do fancy a little snooze, or we're just aware that that can often sometimes sort of calm people down and can make it more challenging to think of what question. We want to leave you guys in a really good space, and I'm really happy that Tatum can do that today. But yeah, certainly any questions that you guys have would be great.
Or,
I guess,
or you know, any reflections on what you find challenging about it. So what happens if you're stuck in the self-soothe mode and are scared to step out of that comfort zone? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, I think that's the really interesting thing about self-compassion, is it's not just treating yourself to cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's about how you support yourself. So if you're aware that you're not supporting yourself, you can challenge that, but you have to do that in a way, I think, that supports yourself and doesn't criticize yourself. Like Tatum was saying earlier, like, what do I need? How can I help myself? If you're feeling like you're in a rut, and I certainly have been at points, what can I do to support myself to get out of that? Not what should I do, not what other people are telling me I should do. What do I think might help me? Like, just having a bit of self-reflection, and just going on that as well. I think often our lives are so busy. Some of you might have kids, you might be working full time, going through cancer as well. Maybe booking in a meeting for yourself, like once a week, once a month, booking it in your diary and meeting with self. I saw that in a podcast once and I absolutely loved it. And it's a chance to reflect, a chance to think, wait, how am I doing? What could I maybe do this evening that might support myself more? And I think if you come at it with a point like that, it's difficult to get stuck in a sort of rut, really.
There's also another way of looking at it, depending on what's going on in your life, that actually there are times and there are seasons to be in your comfort zone. And then there are times and seasons to set out of it. And maybe it just isn't that time yet. So usually when you're just about to step out of your comfort zone, you've got a bit of energy and you start to get a bit bored and you start to get a bit, and then you're like, oh, there's some energy that's bringing me out, wanting to take me out of that zone. I was watching a show and it was about like the best restaurants all around the world. Well, it wasn't about the restaurants, it was a competition show, but the chef from one of the best restaurants in the world, so is part of, you know, in the food industry, it's a 24-hour produce 7 days a week. Like, there is no respite. It's all production. He decided that for 4 months of the year to close his restaurant to focus on being creative, because he said it's impossible to be going and going and going all the time. And so in the Western world, we tend to think of productivity happening on the outside of the body. So we tend to think that it's what we see, it's out here, what we're doing, what we're creating. And in other parts of the world, there is an idea that in stillness, it's the inside of our body that's being productive. So the inside of the body that's taking care of balancing hormones, you know, taking down adrenaline, reducing cortisol, healing cuts and bruises, repairing skin, growing hair, that actually when we are still, we are being productive. And so there's less feeling that we have to immediately get out of a rut. And so just another way of kind of thinking about that comfort zone is to think about, well, maybe this is a time to be in it, and that's okay too. So yeah, I quite like that guy with his restaurant going, no, 4 months off.
Yeah. And I think Becky's got another interesting question there as well. So sort of resources for ideas of challenging self-talk. Tatum might have some thoughts on this as well, but I certainly think one of the modules of counseling that I'm learning is called transactional analysis. And there's a lot in there about ego states, about games that people play with themselves, but also sort of self-compassion and being kind to yourself. So I think if you're interested in a real sort of framework way, looking at that can be really helpful. You can have a Google. There's a fantastic book I read called Counseling for Toads, which is I'm not very a heavy sort of textbook reader, but it's based on the story of Wind in the Willows. But the toad gets depressed and goes to a counsellor, and the counsellor is a TA counsellor, and it's a great read, and I really recommend it. But there's also tons of stuff out there. It might take a little bit of Googling, but I definitely recommend having a sort of dig into that as well. And just Corinne's read that book too. So yeah, it was one of my favorites in the course. And there's often some quite heavy textbooks, but that one really helped me to understand my script, and my script was about beating myself up. And challenging that and changing that was really a part of helping myself to like myself more. But what do you think, Tatum?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's finding what the language that resonates with you. So, you know, I have a lot of yoga teachers on my feed, and I'm a yoga teacher myself, but there can be a little bit of this thing of like, gratitude, and you're like, and so for me personally, like, I sometimes I resist that because there's something about that maybe it doesn't feel genuine to me. But what I've been practicing getting into bed at night is doing it, but in my own way of speaking. And like, it's again different for everyone. So I get underneath the covers and I squeal, and I'm like, I love my bed. I'm so grateful for my bed. Oh, I love my room, because that is the way I talk. And for me, it doesn't feel like something out there that I'm trying to bring in. It's like, yeah, it's kind of joyous for me. And sometimes I do it and I make myself laugh. Some people will use, there are loving kindness meditations where you send love to each part of your body. Some people find that really useful. Other people find it a little bit alien because that's not the way they talk to themselves. One other suggestion, though, is that there's some meditations online that have affirmations in it. There's sometimes, if it's hard to affirm yourself, sometimes it can be weirdly reassuring to have somebody else say it, especially if you've got it in your earphones. It feels so intimate. I don't know if you're into ASMR, but that closeness and someone saying, I'm proud of you. It's like, sometimes that can be so nice. It can be exactly what you need. So also don't feel that you have to always do it yourself. Sometimes you could even find a place that someone says the words to you.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, you've got a really nice compliment there, Tatum.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
And just quickly touching on compliments as well. sometimes it can be really helpful to hold on to those compliments. And I know certainly I have a couple of post-it notes that people gave me compliments, and I thought, right, I'm going to save those. And when I'm having a really tough time, that's what people think of me. So maybe beating myself up and everything doesn't quite link in with that. Like, that's what other people are saying to me. So trying to sort of build that into my self monologue.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I used to be someone that if someone gave me a compliment, I go, oh no, you know, and then I used to make a joke out of it, and someone would give me a compliment. I go, oh, thank you so much. I'm going to save that for a rainy day. You know, like, thank you. Like, I'm going to keep that. So I think, yeah, accepting a compliment, giving yourself a compliment, you know, feeling fierce before you leave the house, like, you know.
My mum's got a friend that she plays golf with, and he's quite similar to me, but when he hits a good shot, he just goes, oh, good shot, Jerry. And even that little act, but like, you go for a walk, oh, you did really well. And similarly to what Simon Amstel was saying before, but like, you did a good job. Like, we're all going to get that critic sometimes coming up and saying nobody liked you and you did rubbish and you forgot this word. Maybe instead think, well, I might have forgotten one word, but I remembered all the rest of them. So
yeah, it's got really good tips here about having a special email folder for complimentary emails, and someone called it the Happy Mailbox.
Oh, I love
that. The Happy Mailbox.
I got so into this at one point that in my previous job, a couple of times I would leave my lunch in the fridge at work and think, you know, previously I would have said, oh, you idiot, you know. And I sort of challenged that, but went so far the other way that I'd come into work on a Monday and I'd have this email from myself and it'd say, oh, don't forget to take your lunch out the fridge. You're awesome. You're doing a really great job. And I'd be like, it would almost make me cringe, but laugh at the same time. And like, I was like, that's come from me. So yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And someone else has suggested asking friends and family to say 5 things they value about me, and they read it when they're feeling shit. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. That's really lovely. So whether it be from yourself, people you know, some random person on the internet talking about affirmations, like, you know, there's so many different places that we can get this from. So if you'd like, we can end this today with a relaxation. You can be sitting up, you can lay down. All I would say is that you feel nice and comfortable. So take a moment to feel into your body and just see, is there anything that feels like it might want to move? So sometimes when we sort of check in with ourselves, we're like, oh, actually, it's a bit stiff, or like a pillow, or any little adjustments, any little movements. And now that I'm tuning in, I can feel like the urge to take a big yawn. So you're welcome to join me. So know that you can yawn, you can do anything that feels nice here, and you can have your eyes closed if you like, or just soften your gaze if it doesn't feel nice to have them closed. So all of this is adaptable. All of this is just to feel nice. And we're going to notice the breath. So without any judgment, without any trying to change it, we're just noticing what the breath is doing. Noticing its speed, maybe noticing its volume. And seeing if you can feel how far your breath travels into your body before it turns around and comes back out. And starting to be aware of your lower abdomen. And on your next breath, just see how it might feel as you breathe in for the air to go to the lower part of your abdomen, before turning around and coming out. So we're just using kind of a picture in our mind, using our imagination to have a different experience of breath. And then with your next inhale, imagining the breath going all the way down to the bottom of your tailbone. And as you exhale, imagine the air going up along your spine, following its curves up the back of your neck, over your head to your forehead. And then exhale, think about the front of your body, your nose, your chin, your chest, your stomach, all the way down to your tailbone. So we found a circle. We're inhaling to come up along the spine, back of the neck, and exhaling down the front of the body. And you can do this at your own speed. Finding that orbit of the breath, inhaling up and along the spine to your forehead, and then exhaling down the front of your body. Noticing if your shoulders start to soften. Noticing how it might feel on the exhale. Imagining your jaw relaxing. The space between your eyebrows being smoothed out. We're doing a couple more of these breaths here, whatever speed suits you best. There's no rush. When you finished with the second circle, I'm going to take one hand to your lower abdomen and one hand to your heart. And we're just going to check in with two questions. What do I need? And it could be as basic as, actually, I'm a bit dehydrated. I could use a glass of water. It might be seeing if your body actually would like to move a bit more or rest. Might be that you're craving an activity. What do I need? And following up, how can I make things easier on myself? Just feeling your breath flowing in and out. And it could be as simple as, I will get myself that glass of water. Or it might be something that you've heard today that you'd like to incorporate. I could make things easier on myself if I gave more space to checking in. What do I need? How can I make things easier? And if there is an emotion, rather than something practical or an action, what can I do to make it easier? Might be to send a soothing, comforting, validating message. Perhaps thinking about what would be really soothing for you. And imagining a ball of light if you like to imagine things, and if you don't, that's okay. You can stay with that breath just moving in and slowly out. Or you can think about that circular breath we did along the spine. And if you're someone that likes a visual, you might imagine a light shining on your toes. And that light is full of acceptance and validation for each one of your toes. That light absorbs all the work your toes have done, all the places they've taken you. And it just thinks they're brilliant just the way they are. And then that warmth and that peacefulness comes up around your feet to your ankles on both your left foot and your right foot, your right and your left. Makes its way up around your right ankle and your left ankle. Now this light, this acceptance is all the way down your right leg to your right toes and all the way down your left leg to your left toes. It's in and around your hips. That warmth, that care, that valuing is now moving back into that pattern of breath along the spine, up and around the back of your neck, over your head to your forehead. That place in between your eyebrows. And imagining that warmth, that peacefulness, calming your brain cells, calming the muscles of your forehead, honoring everything it touches, and then gently making its way now down your face, to your chin, your throat, your heart, down your right arm and your left arm, down to your chest, all the way down your front to your lower abdomen. And taking a moment to imagine this soothing, comfortable light bathing you from the top of your head to the tip of your toes, giving you the space to check in. What do I need? How can I make things easier for myself? And then very, very gently starting to wiggle your fingers and maybe wiggle your toes if they're free. Maybe take a little stretch, a little sigh or a little yawn here. And I hope that you feel nice and relaxed after that. It's a good place to check in with what we need when our adrenaline has gone down. So thank you, all of you, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And we will be sending all the slides out, probably not till late next week, so don't expect them straight away. And yeah, thank you so much for coming along. And I think everyone, I was going to say should, but could give themselves a pat on the back for taking that first step to being kind to themselves. So yeah, self hugs all round. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.